Welcome everybody here to the Segal Theatre Center at the Writing Center at CUNY. My name is Frank Hentschker and I'm the director of the Segal Theatre Center. Today is a special day. Not only we have a 6:30 program with Julia Charco, who is head of playwriting also at NYU, but as an important additional event we are presenting today the very special new issue from the American Theatre magazine, which is here on theater in Japan, on contemporary theater in Japan. As you know, whoever follows our programs here at the Segal Center know that we're deeply engaged with contemporary Japanese theater. We have 2 times presented a series with playwrights who we invited here, translations, many events in between. And of course also our faculty member Peter Eckersall is the foremost Asian theater specialist in the country here. So we are good friends and partners with our Japanese theater friends. We have with us the Japan Foundation, who has been also a great supporter of our work. And again here, they also have supported the travels and the work of Cindy Sibilsky and Shin Kurokawa, who created that very special issue which we have here. And I think we have some floating around. I hope you can get it, but everybody knows American theater is a significant, important magazine from the theater industry and also for the theater landscape here in America. Rob Weinert Kent also is a good friend. We have done 1 or 2 events with him here at the Segal Center. But again, the focus on Japanese theater is something that of course intrigues us, and this was really a very, how would one say, Herculean effort over 5-6 months to really have a look at Japanese theater at the moment and put it into a magazine. Everybody who has ever done such a work really knows what that means. We have with here, of course, today Cindy, where is she? Is here, who put this together, and Shin, who also has created a documentary. We'll see a trailer of their upcoming work. And then we have Peter Eckersall here with us, Yoko Shioya from the Japan Society. Yoko is there, and Kyoko Iwaki, who is also a visiting scholar at the moment and a theater critic, a prominent one and researcher in Japan. The Segal Center bridges academia and professional theater, American and international theater, and so we have a very long tradition also collaborating with Japan Society. So it's a great honor for us to host this. There will also be a little reception, not here in the room, because we will have to prepare for the upcoming evening, but there's a bar around the corner. It's called the Archive Bar. It's on 36 between 5th and Madison, and I have the address with me, so come with me, walk with me, or I give you the little handout. So you will celebrate this, I think, real achievement. And I think the Segal Center is known for really celebrating the work of artists, but we also celebrate the work of curators, editors, publishers, writers, and we think it's a very significant contribution. Again, thanks to the Japan Foundation. We have the great Kenji Matsumoto with us here, who has been a great friend of the Segal Center, and also Koji and Kanako, where are they? Oh, they're here. So also thank you very much for coming. And we have the rundown of the event and the bios in our program. But now I also have the pleasure to give the microphone over to American Theatre Magazine, who would like to say, of course, a few words about this major effort they put out. Russell Denben is here with us, but also Alison Considine. And Alison will give us a few words and then hand the microphone over to Cindy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hi, I'm Alison. I'm the associate editor at American Theatre Magazine, and we are so glad that you're here to help us celebrate the beautiful May-June issue that we put together. American Theatre Magazine is published by Theater Communications Group, the National Service Organization for U.S. Nonprofit Theater. TCG has more than 500 member theaters across the U.S. It's the largest independent trade publisher of dramatic literature in North America, and we are the exclusive distributor of the Martin E. Segal Theater Center's publishing wing. Individual membership to TCG includes an annual subscription to American Theatre Magazine and full access to our content on americantheatre.org. In addition, TCG membership offers access to art search job listings, discounts on publications, theater tickets, and more. So for some more information, be sure to grab a copy of the magazine, and there's some membership info inside. And I'd now like to introduce you to Cindy Sibilsky, the guest editor and curator for this very special issue. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. So, to get us started tonight, again, thank you so much for being here. This means a lot. this kind of came about with a conversation I was having with Teresa Eyring, who couldn't be here. She's the president of TCG, and we were talking about my international work as a producer and press, and I said, well, I love American Theatre Magazine. It'd kind of be a dream to write for it. And she said, well, propose to Rob to be a guest editor. We don't really have that, but why not? And amazingly, he accepted, and he accepted my proposal on Japanese contemporary theater. So when that happened, then I had to realize, oh, I've got to go to Japan and see more theater. And that's when two people were extremely helpful. Japan Society, Yoko Shioya, and then Japan Foundation, without whom this would have not been possible at all. Both supported me, set up all the interviews with these luminaries, and you're going to see some of that. Were you watching the video beforehand? Right? Yeah. So we actually have the cast and the company from Ashita no Majo that's playing through this weekend at Japan Society. It's a combination of Manga, which is Ashita no Jo, and Macbeth. It's insane. If you miss it, you're insane. I've seen about every Macbeth possible. It is my favorite, and that is not lip service because they're here, because I'm speaking in English, so they probably couldn't understand if I said otherwise. But the truth of the matter is the show is phenomenal. The company's phenomenal. We had our interview with them and have become very close with a lot of these Japanese companies. So to that, Shin and I are making a little mini documentary from our experiences, and we've got an extremely rough cut to show you. So again, not audio fix, nothing. What this is a tiny glimpse of the 30+ interviews we conducted with some of the most important figures in Japanese theater. We saw over 20 shows, and this is kind of just a tiny, tiny taste of that. So please enjoy. This is Cindy Sibilsky reporting from Nijo-jo Castle from Kyoto, Japan. In the next coming weeks, we're going to be doing special features, exclusive interviews with the most important theatrical figures in Japan contemporary theater right now. This is part of a special edition of American Theatre Magazine out in May, June, where I will be covering the very best of Japanese contemporary theater with several Japanese colleagues. It's going to be very exciting. Stay tuned. Tell us about your thoughts on contemporary Japanese theater, how you fit into it, and what you hope for the future.
言葉を大事にするってことは、言葉に対して批評的に見なきゃいけなくなってくると思うんですよ。客観的に見たいって思うので、日本語から遠いところに行きたいなって思って、海外を、拠点にしたいと思って海外活動してます。で、それは、翻って考えると、日本語がもっともっと身近になっていくなって思ってます。なので、僕周りの同世代の劇団もですね、たくさん海外に行って、僕らはその海外を拠点にする同志が欲しいなと思っている次第であります。もっと海外にみんな行けばいいなと思ってます。
You've mentioned that Bunraku puppet theater has inspired and informed your work. When did you first encounter Bunraku, and what were your impressions of it?
僕大学時代です。まず大学時代に影響を受けたというか、日本の文学者で谷崎潤一郎っていう小説家がいるんですけど、そこでその小説の「タデクイモ」っていう小説があって、そこにちょっと文楽の一節が入ってるんですね。でそれを読んで、なんか面白そうな世界を、文章で描いてるなと思って、それで見たいなと思ったのが最初のきっかけです。実際に文楽見て、3人使いで3人で人形やってるんですけど、なんていうんだろう、段に分かれてるというか、お話がこういくつかの構成でされてるんですけど、一つのセットで、役者さんが演じる、人形が演じるんですけど、そこでこうなんていうんだろう、ちょっとした仕草とか、リアルに結構リアクションが大きいところは分かりやすいんですけど、何もしてないとか、例えば こう何かお茶を立ててるとかタバコを吸うとかそういう仕草がすごくなんかこう自然でちょっとそういう影響を僕のアニメーションにも入れたいなと思ったんですよ。
What's your vision for both yourself and Japanese contemporary theater for the future?
僕は全部日本のコンテンポラリーティアスを見たわけではないので何とも言えないんですけども、一言ではちょっと言えないんだけど、ただ日本の人の持っているお互いを認め合おうという精神はやっぱり何かの影響があって世界に伝えていきたいという気持ちはあります。ただ日本のコンテンポラリーシアターが全部どうだとはまだ言えないかな。今僕は日本はね不思議な本当にねフローテンアイランドだと思ってるんですよ。すごいだからこそある意味では何かを知らないこともある。外の世界を知らないっていう弱さもある。でもそれがいい意味でお互いを信用しようとする気持ちにつながっているところもある。今大きく日本は変わり目になっていて、どんどん外国人の方が増えてきた時に初めて日本人がちょっと待てよ、その優しさだけではない何かも必要なのか、いやだからこそ優しさが必要なのかというこの2つの道に分かれているような気がするんですが、ただまだ日本人の持っているそういう人への思い、人の心を読もうとする気持ちっていうのは大切だとは思います。
What do you predict for the future of Chambara style performance on stage? Of course, we see it in the movies, but what would you like to see and what do you think will happen?
Future. そう、やはり、日本のカルチャーというのは、世界中ですごく愛してくれてるし、ただ日本は島国なので、なかなかこう世界でパフォーマンスでこう、世界をこう回っていくっていうことがなかなかできないんですけれども、でも僕の夢はカムイでジャパニーズのトラディショナルとかポップカルチャーとかいろんなミュージックとかいろんなものをミクスチャーして、で、カムイ侍が、フラッグシップになって、それで世界をこう回ってワールドツアーシアター、あとはオフコースムービー、そして、あとはスクールもですね、今やっていることをステップアップさせていって、で一番大事なのは僕がアーティストとしてもちろん、ブランディングもしていきたいんですけれども、それだけではなくて次のネクストジェネレーションに、作品を残していくっていうことを、大事に、これからもみんなと活動していきたいなと思います。だからニューヨークにもスクール作りたいですね。そしてパフォーマンスをブロードウェイでやりたいです。
How do you feel 2.5D musicals fit into the contemporary Japanese theater market?
もう日本の中で一つのジャンル、ずっと僕らはいわゆるこうブーム、一過性のブームじゃなくてちゃんとジャンルとして日本のエンターテインメントの一つとしてジャンルになりたいって思ってるし、もっと言うと世界のジャンル2.5ジャパニーズ 2.5 ミュージカルっていうものが世界のジャンルになるように頑張ってる、で今は日本の中で特に若い世代にとっては一つのジャンルとして、確立しつつあるというのが今の現状。
About the Asian market and how it's seen, and as you said, you've never developed and brought something there original. I don't think many has beyond what you've mentioned, this kind of exotic Orientalism, which is not a fair representation of the culture as a whole, and no one else has done it, so it's intriguing to me looking at the timeline as you've mentioned. Japan's theater industry has definitely been a stronger presence in the global market more than other Asian nations. So it would seem logical the first to be able to break in that way would be Japan and would likely be Shiki, because you have been building this for decades. So to that, what would you like to, and this is of course just dreaming, what kind of stories would you like for Japan to tell the world that are not that just exotic Orientalism that people are assuming? What stories are both Japanese and universal that is moving towards that? I know that that's a large thing to ask.
いや、ご指摘の通りですね。我々が海外のライセンサーから、受け入れている作品のようなですね、普遍的なテーマと魅力を持ったものを作りたい。これはだからアジアの特殊な演劇だから珍しいから見に行こうと思われているうちはダメですね。食べ物で例えればオリエンタルな香辛料であるうちはそんなに多くは受け入れられないでしょ。そんなものたくさん必要ないわけだ。我々はだからパンやなんていうかな、ライスといって主食にならなきゃ日常的に食べていただけるようなものを何にも意識せずそういうものを作らなければいけないと思います。それと、もう一つ言うと今本気になって我々やってるわけですけれども、日本のいろんなプロダクションがそれこそ生きるや海外を目指して頑張ってるデスノートのようなものとかね。ただ我々は開発のためのインフラがもう十分にあるんです。まずここがありますよね。
Clearly.
もうとにかく24時間使いたいだけ使えるわけです。それからいろいろな例えば支援会であったり読み合わせであったり場面の点検であったりに必要な俳優たちはたくさんいる。それからあと海外の非常になんていうかな複雑なテクニックを使った舞台を完全に再現できる能力を持った技術者が、これまたやっぱり400人ぐらいいます。この人たちをフル回転させるということですね。それでこの仕事は望んでいる。
That's so wonderful. It's much more than I expected. How thrilling about the future and interesting that the concerns about the future are actually serving as an impetus to do great things.
当然今申し上げたことは夢です。だけどそれは夢で終わらせるつもりはありません。
It starts with a dream.
そうですね。
And that's how, I mean, look at what happened with Andrew Lloyd Webber, with Disney, with Shiki itself, 10 university students, and now this.
そうですね。後でメモリアルルームにもぜひ行っていただいて、
Yes.
我々の先輩たちがそこで我々はいつでも見てくれてると思うんですね。その人たちに恥じない組織にしなければいけない。
So thank you for that view into the documentary that's upcoming. And maybe we go right away to our panel. Michael, Cindy will start, but I'm going to ask the panelists to come. Peter and Kyoko and Yoko to join us. Yeah, you sit there in the middle. So sit next to Peter. So push the microphone up on top. Not only that we hear each other better, but also the great HowlRound is live streaming this event. So again, thanks to HowlRound. First, Cindy, maybe you brought a couple of slides, but maybe a bit. So tell us a little bit about the experience and the journey you made. What surprised you, and what was a discovery?
Well, we'll take the first slide. So this is the company Shochiku. And what do we see here? Does anyone recognize any of the characters or what these figures might be? Miku, right? Hatsune Miku? That's her. And what about the other guy? Does anyone know what that kind of a look is? Kabuki, right. So Kabuki is a 400-year-old tradition. And a lot of Japanese theater, what's really amazing about it is how its traditions transform. So they're taking these ancient arts. No theater is actually the oldest continually practiced theater in the world, and Kabuki is one of them. They have continued this.
There's Katakali dance.
Well, yes,
many others, but yes, it's
performing
one of the
arts. But
oldest.
as far as theater, absolutely. But as far as pure theater with the text, it is one of the oldest for sure, and something that the artists are doing now is bringing it to the contemporary realm. So this is very exciting as far as the Shakespeare productions, like Ashita no Majo, like Metal Macbeth, which is on our cover, and elements like this, which is called Chokabuki, which means extreme or super kabuki, and what this is a fusion of bringing together the old and the new. And the next one. And on that note, a big thing is high-tech. This probably doesn't surprise anybody about the Japanese being very forward-thinking with the high-tech. So you have companies like Nibrol that use they're a dance company primarily, uses some text, but incredible video projections, really the wildest stuff. And this actually is architectural technology. This is from IHI Stage Around Tokyo, which is the second in the world of a 360-degree theater experience. And this was a show called Seven Souls in the Skull Castle by Gekirin Shinkansen. Really amazing samurai drama, epic, opera, everything you could want revolving around you, quite literally. And then we got the next one. And then this is a piece of actually Antigone. So this is from Spock from Satoshi Miyagi-san. Spock is the Shizuoka Performing Arts Center. Oh, it's right here, we have a visual. And this is actually going to be coming to New York in September. So to the Park Avenue Armory, so please everybody mark your calendars for that. What's exciting about this is what the theater companies are doing now, that they're going not only abroad in the West, there was Japanisma that was in Paris, that was all over France, they're coming to America, but also looking east a lot more. And that's really exciting to see how the Asian nations are now collaborating and having culture exchange themselves.
Wonderful, thank you so much. Peter, I think you wrote a bit about TPAM and other things. So why should we look, at Japanese theater?
Well, hi everyone. I was asked to. This was part of a whole, I think, big plan to try and get a diverse coverage of trends, various trends in Japanese theatre, because there's so much to cover from the traditional worlds right through to the modern drama, and then also the various contemporary circles of performance that are taking place. So Cindy actually commissioned articles specifically from people to focus on different things, and one of the things that I'm interested in is not so much the Gekinan Shiki or the contemporary commercial work, but I work very much on the theatre that came out of the 1960s underground and what we might call the contemporary theatre movement of Japan. So I'm very interested in the playwrights and directors that have come out of that. And also one of the trends, I think, was that when I started working with Japanese artists in the 1990s, that the trend was to, if you had a successful show, to try and tour it to an arts festival in Europe, or perhaps do a collaboration with Australian artists, or occasionally to come to New York as well. But there was, very little attention given to the region that Japan is in. And so what I did in my piece for the contribution was to perhaps look at some of the histories of Japan's kind of touring relationship and artistic relationship to artists in the region, because what we see is, since the 1960s, a kind of way in which the first communications were, of course, I guess, foregrounded by the reality of Japan's history and the wartime memories. And so it was quite an important gesture for a company to go and work with or collaborate with artists in China. Of course, China was also in the midst of a very particular time of its history with the Cultural Revolution, and also, looking in the 1980s, where people like Hirata Oizawa took his company to Korea and made very strong relations there. And then I wrote right up to the present day, where for the last 5 or 6 years, the Tokyo Performing Arts Meeting has had a very strong focus on kind of curating or producing certain kinds of networks for artists to work inter-regional. And it's been very interesting, because I go to that, I try and go to that meeting every year to see younger artists, the new generation of artists, forging links, not so much with Europe or the United States, but actually with artists in Southeast Asia, East Asia, and West Asia. And so there is this very strong conversation now, I think, that is a very interesting one, that is leading to new forms, because these artists are collaborating, bringing their own traditions and their own histories, leading to new kinds of negotiations of language. And also, I guess, the cultural politics of this are really fascinating, because they're pioneering. They're a generation of people who are perhaps imagining a new possibility for the way in which the region can exist.
Thank you, Peter. How many did you commission? How many contributions?
So in total. Let's see, I had
More or less, yeah.
four contributors, and then Shioya-san was interviewed as well.
Yeah, so talk about your interview, Yoko, which is also published in the magazine and online, I think, even in a longer version. What did you focus on? What do you feel was important that the readers of the American Theatre magazine knew?
I haven't read this print version.
Your interview, just your interview.
Just my interview. Well, that interview was about how I pick up the production that I brought from Japan and introduce. I mean, presenting.
How do you pick? So how you live? You know New York so well. You're here for
yeah.
almost
Well,
years.
how
do you do that? How do you say this is significant? New Yorkers should see it.
Well, yeah. I mean, there are many angles and many criteria. So, but then anyway, the most important thing is that what I brought is something that you don't normally see in this city. Talking about speaking of in this city, New York, it's plenty of theater, commercial, experimental, large, small, or workshops and stuff like that. I still can see things that we don't normally see in this country. In that sense, normally I don't really quite, although I enjoyed very much of the production or whatever, everything, I don't quite bring the things which are, probably in my language, straight theater. So the beginning, something happens, dynamism, something happens, and then the end, like very linear story. That is usually I don't really bring. And then also the body movement or the relationship between two bodies or multiple bodies, that's relationship or the pace of the relationship, changing the relationship, the body, that is something that I quite often uniqueness in Japan that you don't really see. That's, of course, it's theater is a time-based arts. So that's how we pace, what conveniently called pace, is very important elements to make the theater. So that's another thing. And then, of course, actually in a long history of Japan Society and the Japan Society's performing arts program, which started in 1953, when I became the director, I was the first Japanese director whose mother language is Japanese.
And body too.
Yeah, body as well. Yes. So 100% Japanese. So the theater is when you see like a German theater or the French theater, whatever. I think you feel that following the story or following the dialogue, the language is not really about theater. In addition to the music or the sound or lighting or the projection or anything, it's following the language is not about telling you what this theater is about. And there are many layers or hidden hint or connotation or references, which is very far connotation, but if you are original Japanese, you immediately click what it means, which actually many elements of the Ashita Majo that is happening at the Japan Society. I have a postcard, so please pick up.
It's in the programs.
It's in the program, of course. And then, anyway, I'm so accustomed to do the
you.
commercial when I'm speaking.
Yes. No, but thank you. We understand, and you have been in the Japan Society for a long time. Also, you people before you, we presented exquisite, fantastic, brilliant work, and really something we don't see. Kyoko, tell us about your contribution, what you felt American readers should know about Japanese theater.
Okay. For me, I'm writing, so where should I start? So my research was on, I think most of you know that in 2011, Japan had a real huge nuclear crisis with earthquake and tsunami, so it's a triple attack. And from that point onwards, for me, and also for a lot of people who are involved in Japanese theater, that the vision of towards reality has changed to a certain degree, depending on who you are. I don't say everyone has changed. Most everyone in commercial theater has not changed, from my perspective. Most of the people who responded are those people who are recently called as the weaker strand. There is this word called weak strand right now. So there's those people who are deliberately using their bodies to convey these literal voices, which are being swept away by these huge money coming in from Olympics right now. So my vision was to portray kind of a negative picture. For instance, if the positive picture was this huge Olympics narrative coming out from a huge money, huge governmental funding, the other side, the darker side, or the weaker side, is the voices that I wanted to introduce through my article. So it's mainly about, my article was about robots or animals or spiritual things, which is actually what human people now want to relate a little bit more than actually pre-Fukushima, because they, from my perspective, they're being more secluded. I mean, it hasn't started like from 2011, it was already starting from this economical downturn that started in the 90s. But then it's becoming more and more because of this economical as well as ecological situation that's happening right now. So people feel threatened by other humans that they could communicate the same thing, which is a fear actually in Japan, because we are considered a homogeneous society, which is threatening for me, but for Japanese people that's peaceful. And they think that, okay, we can't assume now that everyone is looking at the same reality. So they think that if I am having a conversation, for instance, with you, Frank, we might be seeing a different reality per se, because this water right here, you might think it's not contaminated and drink it, whereas I could just bring in an Evian and say, I'm sorry, I can't drink it because I think that's not really safe. And there's a invisible division between there. So that kind of invisible reality could be visualized through theater, from my perspective. So
through non-human
exactly.
robot or animals or spiritual thinking. But before we open up also to the audience, a question to all of you maybe. What would you say to American or European theater makers? What can you learn from Japanese theater? What is unique or special? What is something one could pay special attention to? That's something that they are perhaps at the avant-garde, like one step ahead. You know, of course, it's a global world we live in. Dramaturgy is local, but also global, and there is an interaction. But still, is there something you all think this is something the world might know more about? Should?
I think the thing that I noticed most of all, with the through line from the absolute fringe to the complete commercial of even shows that I had seen before, like Cats, is the physicality. So in Japanese theater, the cornerstone to me is its corporal realities. Everything is physically
Cats
based.
is completely Japanese theater.
No, but they were Japanese actors.
You mean the acting style?
So to me, seeing over 20 shows in this span of time, from the most fringe to the most commercial of even an American musical, they all had this same physical presence that is stronger than I've seen of any culture. And that's the basis of the acting. A lot of that does come from the origins, the roots of No and Kabuki. And you can see that in the modern works too, that it's so much physically based, so that even in a Chekhov play, you knew of the three women, though I couldn't understand a word of it because it was all in Japanese. The one with the slight hunch was a little more shy. The one like that, it was that obvious. And that's kind of something really beautiful I noticed throughout every single show, that the physicality is the cornerstone.
Yeah, the representation of the body on the stage. Yoko, what do you think is? But you also, you have here on the panel. What do you think? I mean, you are curating the plays. What do you feel is something that you say? You know, this is something that really I wish that
no,
I
actually,
see more in American.
I need a little more time to think about it, so that's why
Okay, very good. Okay.
Well, it's a very big question, I think, but just to try and answer it briefly with two perspectives. The first one is history and the way that Japanese theatre engages with a kind of parallel modernity to the experience of European or American theatre, and that's a very profound and interesting thing to think about, the fact that there is alternative versions of a certain kind of modernity that I think are really important to think about. But the second one, I think, is, and I'm answering this more as an Australian artist who worked a lot in Japan, and the reason why we looked to make our artistic partners with Japan going back to the 1980s and 90s. And that was a certain sensibility about space, because, and I think Kyoko's rightly pointed out the fact that there are a lot of artists, and not just performing artists, but writers and filmmakers and visual artists in Japan that give us a very comprehensive and really important understanding of the way in which we live in a spatial environmental world, and I think that that's becoming increasingly important. So.
I don't know, your question is what American can learn from Japanese?
What do you think is something that could be inspiring? What do you think is something that is unique about it?
Okay, I could tell from a very kind of negative standpoint. In Japan, basically, I would say it's not too exaggeration that when I say Japanese doesn't have a higher education for the theater. University in Japan normally do not have a theater practical study, so there's no academicism there in practicing. I mean, there are many critics and writers and stuff like that, but then in practicing point of view of making theater, there's no higher education, almost none. It's not really absolutely none, but none is not exaggeration. So then there's no a method or this school or that school or anything. That's probably one of the keys that really the rebel of the creation happens in the theater world. So that's why I said that negative point of view, because I don't really appreciate that the academic practicing system is not existing. I don't really appreciate it, but it might be a kind of power of a very unique way of expression is happening. Another thing, again, in the negative point of view is that it's kind of becoming different, which I mentioned on an interview on American theater, but in Japan, there's a company system. So founder, writer, directors of same person who form the company. And then I think that I mentioned to that, it is called, I called, and then also my former colleague and well-known translator and theater maker called Aya Ogawa also mentioned that it is like a mafia system. So mafia boss work with the same actors. And then a mafia boss is responsible that everybody can have some kind of role in his creation. So he writes the play, and then, oh my God, Frank doesn't have a role in this play. I have to put him on the stage. So adding some kind of character, which is not really necessary at all for the plot.
Of course not.
Yeah, but then I have to be royal because he has been royal to me as a, the mafia boss. So then the great thing about is that the director / writer do not really spend too much time for forming his creative team. Very reliable. In this country, writers are really waiting to be picked up by directors who, try your work. Directors always looking for the good actor, and then good actor, oh great, and then workshop, second time, oh, he is hired by better job and stuff like that. That's constant challenge, yeah.
So the idea of there's the Japanese, the auteur du théâtre in a way, like the
right.
French
However,
films.
as I mentioned, arts for art's sake point of view, I just mentioned that Frank's role is not really necessary for the great way of writing the play, but then I have to add it because of the Frank. And so then also as a director, I know who can do what kind of thing. So it's not really being challenged the situation for your own creation. By back and forth between the director and the actor, and then the director said something and the actor said, oh, no, it's not, it doesn't work, I'll do this, I'll do that. That's kind of encounter or exchange doesn't happen in Japan. So it's a pros and cons, but then that is another, in practicality, it's very good system that you I would say, easily put the idea into the reality.
Into work.
Yeah.
Kyoko, is there a comment from you to say what you feel? I know you're also a curator, you're curating a big upcoming festival in Tokyo. What do you feel is a Japanese theater discovered something that is might be of interest?
So to correct, I'm not curating, I'm just assisting.
Assisting, I'm sorry, yes.
So, but anyway, I think because Japan is in a really unique position in terms of after Second World War. We were, of course, conquered by Americans. And then we were the conquerors of Asia, right? So we are in this kind of dual standpoint in terms of how to understand modernity. So when American people see Japan, they will see like an epitome of toxic element gushing out from America. So these kind of depression, psychological depression, of course, capitalism, and then people being like secluded, and I mean, succeeding is like the only way of living your social life in Japan. That is kind of becoming like the trigger of maybe a lot of suicides. And so this kind of corporate kind of being, you have to be a corporate being to be understood as like a mature human being in Japan, which is already dissolving anyway from the 1990s, but then we have to kind of hang on to it because we think that that's the only way to survive. And we have to kind of dislodge this narrative right now, which is happening anyway, but all the people who are living in Japan cannot stand that narrative because we were following the American footsteps. And then we are now looking to Asia to kind of see that, okay, are we still like #1 in Asia? And that is not true either. And then we have to kind of relocate ourselves in Asia also. And then there's stories, because we're getting weaker. A lot of people, Asian people, are just offending us to apologize, of course, for the past half a century, which we have been doing, but not properly. And then there's this kind of negotiation, again, politically, sociologically, whatever. And so we are in this very fragile moment right now, becoming like a prism, reflecting a lot of global issues from Western perspective as well as Asian perspective. And we have to kind of, we meaning Japanese people, have to relocate and reconfigure ourselves as Japanese and not hang on to the Japanese vision, which was there until the 1980s, I think. Yeah.
Thank you. Maybe one last remark on contemporary writing in Japan. People say there's kind of a renaissance in a way of writing or playwriting in New York. After a while, it's maybe a little bit away again from ensemble work. But how is it in Japan? I know you already said that they work in ensemble. But what are new ideas, new ways of writing for the theater? Are there impulses coming out of Japan at the moment?
Well, I think a big one that one of my entire features is about is anime and manga on stage. And that can be everything from hyper-commercial to Ashita no Majo, which is more bizarre and avant-garde. But because anime and manga is such an important part of Japanese culture, such a significant and major force, it's a natural transition. And this is something that's been happening since the first show was in the 70s, but really since the early 2000s is the boom. And it's one of the biggest markets there. So that's kind of something exciting because it's a newer form of Japanese theater.
I think that these days, well, very recently, I think that young people started to look the inspiration source in Japanese traditional stories, like no stories, or at least started to interest in looking into that. I mean, for the significance of Japanese culture, not just the theater, but in nature, Tominga especially, is that really including my generation, very much detached from traditional. So you go to no theater, American goes to no theater first time, nothing different for contemporary Japanese, but they have no idea, no knowledge, no education, no nothing. But so then, like Kinoshita Kabuki, it's a contemporary theater, but then their story is all about the Kabuki, and then very different way of, direction. And then also Toshiki Okada, which was commissioned, but then rewrote all the Kyogen thing as well. And so comparing with what happened in this Western world, like taking the inspiration or the story from a Greek classics or Shakespeare's or whatever classic genre, we see so many. Comparing with that, Japanese theater had not really seen that thing, but then I think it's becoming more happening.
Thank you.
I guess there's a lot of different examples you could say, but the one that I'm most involved with at the moment is the work of Okada, because I'm working on an edited volume of essays and translations of his work, and he has been one of the most active and visible of the Japanese playwrights. Firstly, as a young playwright writing about the experience of subcultures and youth generation in the early 21st century in Japan, and more recently as a more mature writer, writing very much about ecological and political themes to do with the sense of loss after 3/11, after the triple disaster. And his playwriting has evolved. I mean, his use of language has evolved, but so has his concern about language. I think he's got some very interesting perspectives on quite philosophical perspectives and sometimes very existential on the question of Japanese language itself and how the language responds to trauma and how the language responds to the kind of social experience that Kyoko's just so excellently described.
Kyoko, do you have a thought?
Just simple. There is this thing called monologue theater coming right now in Japan. A lot of people just write long monologues for 1 hour. And that is called monologue theater. And people think that, okay, we don't want to listen to her babbling for 1 hour. But that is how it goes when you enter a theater right now and 20-something person, playwright, is writing. He wants to write a monologue, and that stems from what I said, actually, because after Fukushima, people don't want to speak with other person, interact, because dialogue is all about lying, You just present yourself as a likable person so that you won't be hated by the person in front of you. And then you're constantly lying or performing yourself, and then monologue only becomes your own true loyal feeling. And so there's this thing called monologue theater right now.
Sure, Yudai, who came, we did this Japanese playwright exchange, his work, of course, stands for that. Michael, if you could put up the light for the audience, so we're going to go right away to questions. George, maybe you could help us and run the mic. Again, we are live streaming. Not only we will hear you better with the microphone, but also for our audiences, it's important that you take the microphone. Maybe introduce yourself with your name and if you take a question. But it doesn't have to be a question. It can also be a comment. So a little bit more light on the audience. And is there anything here? Yeah, over there.
Hi, my name is John Bremner. I'm a video designer here in New York City. And so my question is going to naturally be one about technology and kind of going back a little bit. I found it really intriguing that we spoke about how Japanese has very little higher education in theater. And Cindy, you touched on how technological prowess is embraced, which I thought was an interesting contrast to here in the States, where we have a lot of pedagogy and process and resource, and at the same time, I find myself in my profession very challenged to present video in theater. And I'm curious to know, do you see that as a barrier, or like when translating work from Japan to the States, or anywhere in the world, really? I'm just curious to hear a little bit more about how technology plays a role in the translation of the work.
I think it's a very useful role, and thank you for that question. One thing I noticed, and you all can speak to maybe the same thing or something different, but there's a sense of collaboration. So it's not necessarily that someone went to university to become a videographer for theater or to become a technician for theater. They're a videographer for who knows what else, and then they collaborate. The same thing is with musicians and actors. There tends to be a lot of collaboration. So like the company Nibrol, it's very, very advanced. They're working in tandem in this kind of an equal sense with each other. So it's a collaborative vision. Kirin, the show that we saw with the sword fighting and everything, that one also super, super, super high-tech video projections and LED screens from Canada, from one of the most important companies in Montreal. So there's a lot of that coming and going, and I think the nice thing about video work in general is because of language barriers, it's easy to tour because you can package it up, and it does give a visual where there might be the issue of language. So a lot of these 2.5D musicals use a lot of video projections.
It's not really about advanced or behind or anything. It's just simply as Cindy mentioned. It's if artistically, creatively can collaborate this knowledge and that knowledge together. For example, last week, Rhizomatics, the group which is really considered as a top notch of the technology, not just a projection, but like a drone and many things. And they presented as a dance work, and then dancers are choreographed by the choreographer called Mikiko. And then as one of the rare things that the New York Times review, I totally agree with, that it didn't work as a theatrical or like a presentation on the stage. It's more like a attraction in exhibition or something like that. Yeah. So then I would say that what we will present next year is dance work, but that is directed by Tabaimo, who is the visual artist whose video work is very international, well known. And then rather than its choreographer making a work, working with the the visual artist, this is her first trial that the visual artist lead the whole thing to collaborate with the choreographer. So it's not really form of who is leading what, but it's really the how organically different genre people can work together. So it's not really advanced or anything, this matter.
There's a kind of history of this too, because one of the projects I worked on with some collaborators in Japan was a book about the history of the Japanese group Dumb Type. And they were active from the 1980s to the early 2000s, and they really pioneered the kind of new media performance aesthetic. And we interviewed some of the technicians who were young members of the company who joined a company that had a vision for a certain kind of interactivity of media and live performance. And they had to invent systems. They had to work out how to make a data projector speak to a laptop computer, because in those days they were not designed really to speak to each other. So really fascinating discussion with some of the people who became the technical staff, but they had to educate themselves. I'm also thinking about the fact that the Australian performance artist Stellark, who worked a lot with robotic interactive technologies into and immersing in his own body, lived for some 15 years in Japan and worked a lot with medical technicians and robotic scientists to create the kind of interfaces that he was wanting to create, which are very kind of postmodern and cyborgy, but I think that points to this history of the way in which people would go to Japan because the technology was there, but then work with people to work out how to make it work in a performance context, or even a kind of visual art context.
Thank you. Some more comment or question? Yeah, all the way over there.
Thank you so much. I used to produce theater commercially in Japan, and I'm curious, since I've been here, I've seen a lot of intersection between not-for-profit theater and commercial theater here, and I would like to know how you perceive or how you see the relationship between public theater or not-for-profit theater and commercial theater in Japan.
To all of you.
I think they are totally two different words. It's totally different word. It's not really, it has to be, but it's really a big, thick wall between two of the word. The reason why is that it's not really about the monetary system or anything. It's more of like which one you exposed into the world, and then your mind setting is totally different. And so as Japan society, for some reasons, many reasons, I presented kind of commercial theater, the productions which considered as, or definitely commercial theater, maybe more than a few times. It's really amazed me how much different that their mind setting are. And one of the good examples is that quite a long time ago, but then anyway, that theater has one protagonist, Sakamoto Ryoma. All Japanese knows, but no American knows. So in order to have the theater work as a theater to storytelling, we needed to have a little moment who that person is. This is a historical person. So then in order to do that, we put the kind of animation of the PowerPoint presentation. Then we made it, and then it was perfect. Then I told them that, well, this is, as I explained to you, we have a little 3 minutes of explanation of who it is. And then they means that the manager of that commercial theater. Well, actually, we have already hired the video, animation creator, paying in $3,000, and then we can't cancel it anymore. But it is great that you have it already, so this can be a great helpful to make that one. And then what they brought here was exactly same as my staff member make through the PowerPoint. But then they are paying $3,000. It's like, it's just a tiny little difference. One production has many of these things. Why do you have to have this pay? Why do you have to spend this money? That is what I meant by totally different here.
It's a great question, and it was something that really struck me because I'm also a producer, and looking at it in the similarities and the differences, because there's always this nonprofit versus commercial you look at it in Europe and in any kind of a place. Japan was not really subsidized for a long time. This is kind of new. So in terms of what we understand as nonprofit, particularly Europe and America, wasn't really happening until, was it around the 90s? And so commercial theater was kind of the only option besides the underground stuff. So the underground stuff was happening, but it was this vast divide of like fringe, do-it-yourself, and commercial. And with the commercial, what I found very beautiful, and I hope you all got to understand that with Gekiden Shiki, there is this culture of a company. And again, that can have a negative side too, of course, but their actors, and just imagine this on Broadway. You have a job for life. That doesn't really happen. So they have this entire dream factory where they're just building shows and employing staff all the time. That's special. I found that the corporate culture there is not the way that the commercial theater here is, which is very cutthroat. They're very supportive of each other, and they believe in a deeper message. They believe in a meaning behind what they're doing, not just money only. So that's what I've seen.
Thank you. Let's take the microphone for you. 1 second.
Hi, my name is Eric Taylor. I'm an artistic director and choreographer based here in New York City. And thank you so much for what you've all brought to the table. It's very enlightening. My question is, as a choreographer with an extensive background in theater, starting from when I was a young child, How integral is dance in theater in Japan? And what styles of theater does dance present itself? And is Buto considered theater, or is that just a dance form? And from each of you, I'd love to hear about that, about dance.
Peter, maybe you.
Well, maybe I could do a little advertisement too, because we are going to have a conference on Buto here at the university on the 31st of October and the 1st of November. There's been a recent publication, the Routledge Companion to Buto. But speaking more broadly, the history of Buto is very complicated and a fascinating one, because of course it began as an avant-garde practice in the 60s and then spread globally in the 1980s and became very popular in many different places around the world, and now we have Buto companies on almost every continent, as far as I know. So the question of what Buto is and what it might become is always under consideration, though. Buto artists are kind of obsessed with talking about the kind of history and the invention and the reinvention of their own form. There are some crossovers into more contemporary dance, and then there are some pushing back against that notion. There are some people who would like to preserve the kind of presumed border that grew up between Buto and other forms of contemporary dance. But the wider context of dance I'm much less familiar with, so I'll defer to the other panelists. Yeah.
Maybe I could pick up from there. I used to be a ballet dancer, actually, and ballet is the most popular, I think, format. Yes, it sells tickets. It's quite expensive. You have to pay like $150. Like you go to the Met and you pay, I guess, approximately the same amount. Yeah. These tickets sell a lot in Japan because dance, excluding Tokyo, for most part of Japan, it's about doing it. So doing either ballet or Nihon Buyo, which is Japanese traditional dancing, and you do that, and then you learn it from your master. And then you want to see the real master, so that you go to these kind of performances, which are done by masters. So in that kind of closed circuit world, tickets are sold. But apart from that, dance is quite dead in Japan. I mean, there's near zero contemporary dance. Yeah, I mean, it just sucks.
Why do you think that is, though?
There's no training.
There's no training?
Yeah, well, the training is deficient.
And also...
There's no way to go.
Is there, can you go to university for dance, or no?
No.
No?
No.
Not even for theater?
No.
So,
That's actually very much related to Japanese history of performing arts, because the actors are lowest ranked human beings in feudalism in Japan. Well, you are laughing, but the really untouchable rank of the human beings in the
my role is then even the lowest in the company.
Yeah. Actually, there like the top is the Shinoko. Top is a samurai. Second is a farmer. Third is the craftsman. The last is a merchant, and then below is real. Yeah, so then anyway, when Japan became westernized in mid 19th century, it was westernized means that higher education system Japanese learned from Western system, but then looking at their own, well, there's no way to put the performing artists into the higher education. So really, it's not a joke. This is really a reason why that we still do not have.
Do you think it's going to come?
It is happening slowly, but slowly means, anyway, most of the professional people who are working right now is already finished their higher education. So majority of the people who are making is nothing to do with a higher education.
I think perhaps because of that, just to add on one thought, the dance that I have seen is exquisite. It's extremely innovative of what's coming from Japan, and I think partially, those who do it, again, like Niburo, like Dershonera, really interesting companies that, again, are bringing that sense of physicality to all of their work. I find a lot of the traditional arts to look like it's rooted in dance or physicality, even though it's not how we see it. Some of the work that you presented of dance has been incredible.
becoming very hard to find a new one, to be honest with you.
Most people survive abroad, actually.
They work in European companies.
And now Asia. A lot of the dance companies are now touring around Asia instead.
Good. So maybe one last question from you.
Hi, my name is Manam Fujita. I am from Japan. So I know there are not a lot of theater education programs in Japan, and Japanese people do not know how to see theaters. And also I know that a lot of companies are trying to bring new audiences, especially young audiences, by collaborating with like animation or comics. And Kabuki has a lot of programs with like anime, and they had a performance based on the anime of One Piece and Naruto in Japan. But I think young people go and see those performances because they know that specific anime, that specific comics. So I assume that if they go to see another performance or another original contemporary performances, probably a lot of people feel like, oh my God, I don't know what's happening over there. And so my question is, how do you like sustain the audience engagement and audience development from that point?
So you bring up a really good point, and I'm glad you mentioned the One Piece Kabuki, because it was something that we didn't have time for in the video. So Noma-san, the president of Shochiko, that was a discussion with a friend who was a manga publisher about how similar Kabuki heroes are to those in manga and anime. And it was so successful, and what he was saying is he feels it's the most radical thing to happen to Kabuki in 300 years or more. Because all of a sudden, the age group that was something like typically 50s and up was very mixed. So the way that he saw it, and hello, I guess that's telling us a sign. Subtly. Subtle, Michael, thank you. So what's exciting about that is it's evolving too, and how he viewed it, and it has been seen as the success, is that it's introducing the art form to both cross generations. So the exciting thing about merging them is you still have the traditionalists who love their kabuki, who are going to see it, something new, and then you have those who maybe have never seen it before that are all of a sudden discovering, hey, actually this is pretty cool. So again, it is sustainable. It seems to me that the most successful commercially right now is something that is fusing anime and manga. I mean, again, throngs of 20s to 30-year-olds come in selling out every single show to see Prince of Tennis for the past 15-something years. So it's important, and it is important to build the younger audiences, like the president of Yoko Shioya was saying. The audiences are dying out. There's going to be less of them. So you need to cultivate the youth. And that's something that American producers could think of too.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Maybe, Peter, if I can put you on the spot, are there tendencies you are seeing? How Japanese theater, can you make a prediction? I see these are things that are coming up on the horizon, which might be still in the underground, where you say this is something that will actually rise, or that might, we see more of that.
Well, I think there's a great diversity of activity, and one of the interesting things is that there's more. I mean, I'm really speaking only about the contemporary theatre movement, not so much the commercial sector, because I don't really know much about that. But there are more contemporary groups than there were in the past. I mean, we often, my work was originally on the 1960s, and we endlessly cite and work on basically 4 or 5 companies, and now. And you look at the diversity of performance that is taking place, and not just in contemporary styles, but also Yoko's programmed a lot of young women's voices, for example, over the last 2 years. So there's a whole emerging theatre expressing viewpoints coming from maybe feminist perspectives. There's a lot of theatre that is more in the mode of theatre of the real. There's some very interesting companies doing hybrid, kind of traditionally influenced, but updating it for contemporary contexts. So I don't think we can actually really simply summarize this. So I always just answer this question. One of the contributors is in the volume is in the magazine is a very distinguished professor named Tadashi Uchino, who's and I regularly consult him when I go to Japan, and he told me once, well, we can't really say anything. Everybody's doing everything. So.
Well, that's a good end. Again, thank you all. Congratulations on this special issue. Yoko wants you all to come to see the show. It's in your program. Peter, Yoko, everybody, Yoko and Cindy, of course, Shin, thank you. And also you, thanks for coming. We have that little reception around the corner, and I have some drink tickets. So again, it's on 36 between 5th and Madison on the south side in the middle. It's called the Archive Bar. We are there to celebrate that, so I hope you will come and join us. Again, thank you all for coming, and congratulations.